Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Local Film Talk, the show where we get the scoop on local filmmakers and the projects they're working on. I'm your host, Bob Walters. We're here at 106 Main in downtown Durham. And this week we're talking to Michael Howard, a local writer, director, actor too. I see you showing up in a lot of stuff. Yep. And your latest project is actually a feature.
Yes.
Romantic comedy. If I'm not mistaken.
Not a romantic comedy, but...
Not a romantic comedy?
No. Oh, I thought you were joking. Yeah, there's a variety of stuff in it, different themes and stuff, but it's more of a drama.
Okay. So, it's you haven't started shooting it yet. Mm-hmm. This is a little bit different than we normally do. You haven't started shooting it yet. We're just here to talk to you about the pre-production. So tell us a little bit about what this movie's about, what the story and everything.
Yeah, the film, it's called Where We're Meant to Be, and it's kind of a series of 8 different stories that are all interconnected, and the film mainly deals with the theme of connection and kind of where people are at during their pivotal moments in life, and how each of those stories causes that in someone else. And sometimes it's a direct connection, sometimes it's indirect, sometimes it's a minor small thing that you wouldn't think makes a difference, and other times it's a very big thing that is clearly making a difference. And so it kind of touches on how those different things happen to us throughout life. Okay.
And this isn't something that someone else wrote. You actually wrote this one.
I did, yes.
So what gave you the idea?
The idea, it kind of spawned from just smaller things. When I do write films, it sometimes just comes from a line of dialogue or a character and something that I kind of think, all right, well, that would be interesting, what can I do with that? And then sometimes they're unrelated things, and in this case it was kind of that, where I had a couple unrelated stories and they had the same familiar feel of a theme, but were different characters altogether. And so that's kind of where...
Was it like a couple different, like you were thinking of doing a couple of these as different shorts and then you realized they could work together as a movie?
Yeah, I hadn't even gotten that far with thinking, oh, this is a great short film, as much as, oh, this is a cool scene, or this is a cool idea for a character. And then so as I had a few of those, it kind of, as I saw that theme kind of resonating between each of them, I thought of, well, how can I put these into something that makes sense with these themes? And that's kind of where I got the idea of these different stories and seeing how one could cause the other, and what characters could take us from one scene to the next. So. Okay.
So what's writing like for you? How did you put this together? Like how many hours a day do you write? That kind of thing.
That's the thing is this took a couple years because I'm not the type who sits down at like 9 a.m. every day and says, I'm going to write for 2 hours.
Is this your day job, or do you have to do this in the evenings or at night?
I just do it whenever. I have, I do film editing and post-production supervision for a company, and so that kind of allows me the freedom of, if I have some time where I'm really feeling it and writing stuff and then editing later, or vice versa. So things, I can't force myself to write, and if I do, I can maybe get a little bit out, but it's more of, as I'm kind of thinking of it, things will come about, and it's like, all right, well, now I'll start writing this, and it could be 5 minutes of writing before it's like, I'm done for that bit, or a couple hours. And so sometimes there...
It's got to be when the inspiration hits.
Exactly, yeah. Sometimes there could be a month before, I've come up with a new line or a new thought, and, it just kind of goes throughout on that.
And you keep looking over at the table going, I haven't worked on that in so long. I need to get back to that.
Yeah, and really it's more of the idea just kind of stays with me. And a lot of it's laying in bed at night. It's like, all right, I'm going to bed, and then I'll sit there for 40 minutes and have these different ideas coming through my head, and I've got a little notepad by my bed that I'll jot down, random lines or random thoughts, or, explore this a little more or whatever. And then, by the time I go to really kind of start putting it all on paper, I've got 40 or 50 little scratch pieces of paper that have random lines or pieces, or in Gmail I'll open up a draft and just write out a bunch of stuff, and then so I start kind of consolidating all of those and putting them together.
Do you actually outline, or you just have this random collection of notes?
I'll outline if I have an idea for something, but haven't yet thought about particular dialogue or something with it. So I'll be like, okay, well, a father and a son, and I want this to happen. And so then I'll start kind of thinking of that as time goes on. I'll be like, oh, okay, now it makes sense of how to make this happen, and then I'll write that. And so by the time the first draft of the script was finished, I had a lot of it written and then rewritten and rewritten and rewritten. So one
Right.
scene may have been written, 15 times, and then the final scene I wrote was brand new. And so then I
Right.
start kind of going through it all as a full and then rewriting or.
So you start out doing like that vomit draft where you just kind of get everything out and have this, long winding thing, and then just that rewriting process takes forever?
Yeah, yeah. And it's not even so much of, well, it's not working, how can I rewrite it, but just finding the best ways to maybe say this or do that.
Right.
Or I'll have parts of a scene, like the scene opens with a really long, like 12 pages of dialogue of people on a blind date. And it touches on 3 different themes just in that blind date. And so sometimes I would have this section, but not really a way to transition between them. And so that would kind of be the trick, over time of finding out how do I make this flow without it just being, hey, by the way, what do you think of this? And just having this weird,
Right. Those
working
things people
thing.
don't really say.
Exactly, and so finding ways to make it all kind of flow smoothly like a real conversation would go was sometimes the trick, and what takes time is.
So it sounds
getting
like
that.
there are like really long dialogue scenes. You like that kind of stuff?
I
Or
do,
you
yeah.
try to keep it.
It's definitely dialogue driven, and there's some scenes that are kind of faster paced, like Aaron Sorkin type of dialogue where they're going, and then there's some scenes that, it's 4 minutes of mostly visuals and following these characters as they go. So it's a good mix of it, and one dialogue scene will kind of get you, I think, in feeling like you kind of know what's going on with it, and then suddenly 3 big faster paced scenes start and kind of pull you in a different direction and play with it a bit.
So it sounds like the different stories really have different feels to them. Is that kind of like how writers will do different character passes to make sure everybody doesn't sound like the same person?
Yeah, exactly. So the theme kind of resonates throughout the whole thing, but yeah, you definitely see these different characters and these different attitudes and different ways they say things and do things. And so, one story will be kind of a fairly straightforward kind of conversation, and then the other will be, there's some crime and, cop scenes and things like that are a complete 180 in tone and style, but the theme and the things that they're going through and the ways that they're handling it do kind of connect and stay the same.
So who's your favorite character?
The favorite character.
You gotta have a favorite.
Yeah, I'd say the 2 on the blind date that open the film.
Okay.
Yeah, I think them. We get to see quite a bit about them and get invested in their story, pretty strongly. And then.
Was that the easiest to write, or? Did you
I don't
really
know
have
that
to
it's
work at
the
it?
easiest. It definitely took a while because, like I said, it's 12 pages, and so the trick there
This is
is
your
not making
Tarantino
it
scene.
feel. Yeah, it's not making it feel like 40 pages.
Right.
That you want it moving along, and you want the characters to be interesting, and so as this 12 minutes or whatever the scene is goes along, it doesn't feel like that. That you're like, oh, okay, that that was fresh and cool.
Right.
So that's the hope. But yeah, it was tough. But I think that hopefully I succeeded with it.
Well, that'd be an interesting scene because, when you just have 2 people like sitting there talking, then you got to come up with interesting coverage and everything. So it's just not, because we all know how boring it is to just watch 2 cameras cut back and forth between 2 people talking for 15 minutes.
But if you have interesting characters, saying
Right, if they're
interesting
saying
things-
incredibly interesting things, yeah. So
it
how
is.
long did it take you to write this?
I guess about 2 years ago, a little around that is when I kind of first started coming up with the first ideas of the scenes. But then, like I said, there would be months where maybe I didn't write anything, or I just kind of thought about some of the things I wanted to do before putting more. So overall, it's been about 2 years in the making.
On and off for about 2 years. Who was the first person you showed it to?
God, who was the first person? There's a few people friends that I have that are authors or in the film and things like that too. So they're kind of my go-to people to say, all right, read this and see how it works. So yeah, there's a couple close friends.
What
that
kind
I'll
of
do.
notes did you get?
Luckily,
I assume it was generally well received.
It was, yeah, and when I send it to people, they're aware that I'm open to any criticism, because I can send it to my mom if I want her to be like, oh, that was wonderful, honey. I want people who are really, gonna talk about it. And I did get some notes where, people thought, well, maybe this was, should have been this way, or I was a little confused here and things like that. But overall, it was pretty positive, and their there are a few key scenes in the film that I think really help make the film work in a different level, and things that I haven't seen in films before. And so when I was getting the feedback for it, a lot of people were picking up on those, being like,
Right.
I love this scene, or this works so well. And so that helped me feel like, okay, I'm on the right track with it. And if I can make that work in the film, then, it'll be a winner. But,
Right.
we'll see how that goes with the filmmaking itself.
We will see. That is yet to be determined.
Yeah.
So the writing is, it doesn't feel like it sometimes, but the writing is kind of the easiest part because you can do that yourself, but then you have to go and get other people involved. So what was your next step? How did you go about getting the wheels turning on getting a film made?
The next step was just kind of sending it out to people that I've worked with or that I wanted to work with and knew would be good for, certain crew positions or certain, being a part of it in certain ways, and kind of sending it to them and saying, what do you think? I'd love to have you on board. If you like the script, let's talk. And luckily, everyone that I wanted to, bring on board for the most part was able to do that in some regard. And so it was just kind of picking and choosing people that over the years working in the kind of different film circles that, this area seems to have.
People you've met over time.
Yeah, you find, okay, well, I love working with that guy. This guy and I just totally click. This woman and I work great together. And so that's kind of how, I started pulling people in and, bringing them all on
So the first thing you did was get your crew and your cast? You went ahead and talked to actors and everything?
Yeah. There were certain characters that were written for certain people, and so I approached them and said, I'd really like you to do this, and then other ones came up through auditions, and so it was a mix of cast and crew at the same time.
Did you get most of the people that you had written the parts for?
A good amount, yeah. There's
nice.
a couple, some of them were names, and so those we're hoping will still work out. It's kind of right at that level now of seeing if it can work out.
Right.
But a couple of the people that I wrote parts for are going to be flying in for it, and
nice.
in the film. So
flying in. Oh, okay.
Yeah. We have a couple SAG actors that we're using, and actors from California and New York and stuff that are coming in.
So this is a SAG compliant production, whatever you call it?
It's a signatory, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's ultra low budget, but it is a SAG signatory.
So how does that work? Because I'm completely out of touch with the paperwork. I hear the stacks of paper you got to go through. Are nuts, but.
It's a pain in the ass. The thing is that there's kind of two things for it. There's the SAG stuff itself, and that alone is a beast by itself. But before you can even get to that, there's all of the paperwork with like setting up an LLC and getting your tax ID number, because SAG, the problem is with these ultra low budgets is that they do not represent contractors, they represent employees. So I can't bring somebody out and pay them $300 or $400 and then say, okay, here's your 1099, thanks a lot, there's your check. We have to hire them on as employees. And so now you've got North Carolina new hire sheets. If you have 3 or more employees that you're bringing on, so if you have 3 SAG actors, then it's things like wage garnishment forms and things like that. And SAG doesn't care how you get this stuff done. This is just what you have to have done. And North Carolina has all of their stuff in for new hires, and so they don't care how it's done. So, excuse me. So when you're doing things at this kind of lower budgeted level, it doesn't really, none of that stuff makes sense. So to do all of these new hire paperwork packets for somebody who's going to be on set for 3 days, they're not seasonal, they're not full employees, but you're treating them as if they were that way. And so all of the paperwork has to be done. And then with SAG, they expect all of the full payroll service type of things, and that means retirement and taxes and all of that stuff that or unemployment that is going into it, as well as their
So
pension
you got to take
and
out
health.
Social Security and all that crap too.
Yeah, and so all of that becomes this huge headache that I knew SAG was going to kind of be a headache, but it was worth it to bring on the people that I wanted to bring on, but it definitely turned into a lot more paperwork beyond SAG and a lot more money to get those things going.
Was this
you
your
know.
first time doing a SAG?
It
thing?
is, yeah.
So a lot of this was a learning process.
Oh,
for you.
totally, yeah. And I have a line producer, Pamela Smith, who's doing a bunch of this stuff too. And so I haven't even had to deal with all of the things. And the stuff that I've been doing is a ton. So, she's got a bunch that she's been doing and sending
Right.
me, different things to finish filling in and signing. And so putting all that together, even for one person, if people are going to be doing it, be ready. There is a lot to do. So.
I had heard we talked to another director, Michael Babbitt, who's trying to get a movie done that's a SAG compliant thing. And one of the things he was complaining about is that you come up with a budget for what you want to do to make your movie, but then in order to comply with all this stuff, there's all this extra work, and they've got tiers of what you have to pay people and everything. A lot of it's based on the budget of your movie. And you have what you think the movie's going to cost, but once you start adding in all this other stuff that they make you do, that drives up your cost, which pushes your budget into another tier, which raises everybody's pay and adds more paperwork and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Did you run into problems like that?
I didn't.
Did being compliant inflate your budget or anything?
It inflates the budget, but not in the way like his film. He was right on that, from one
right on the
tier to
edge.
the other. So unfortunately, I saw all the problems he had with it. Mine, it's down, under 30,000, so we're nowhere near going to the next tier.
Oh, okay.
But the problem with it is that SAG, they came up with this ultra low budget and said, this is to help filmmakers who want to use a SAG person but don't have a huge budget. So we're going to do something awesome for you. You pay them $100 a day and you're good to go. Pat ourselves on the back. This is awesome, which is great because it is more affordable, and SAG does need to watch out for their people and all that. But the problem is that, okay, so it's $100, but then you've got the health and pension, and so you've got 18% on top of that 100, and then they've got, especially if you're flying them in somewhere else, there's per diems that you take into effect. That $100 is for an 8-hour day. As we know on film sets, it's very easy to get into 10, 12, 14-hour days. And so
That happened
if you
to me
use them-
yesterday. I was supposed to be on set for 8 hours and it ended up being 13.
Yeah, exactly. So their cutoff is at 12 hours, but after 8, it's time and a half. So that 100 is now 175 a day if you go, up to 12 hours or whatever. And so you have to be careful
with
of
a
those
low budget
things.
thing, like an ultra low budget thing like this, you're trying to get as much done in a day as possible.
Oh, totally, yeah.
Yeah.
And so if you have a lot going on, or
12-hour
you're using
day is a
them
short
for,
day.
if you're using them for a couple days, that can add up pretty quickly. And then if you're flying them in and you're paying that per diem, and say I'm using them on a Monday, Tuesday, and a Wednesday, well, say Sunday and Thursday are their flying days, well, they're still getting paid money, in per diem on those days, plus the ticket, plus then, the SAG rates themselves on the other days, plus if it goes over, and then that's not even including if you get into penalties because it took 6.5 hours to get the food instead of 6. And so you got to just be very careful. And like I said, I understand why those are in place. They want to protect actors, and it's a great thing to protect them. But when it comes to these lower budget films and these smaller type of sets and all of that, it can be a big hassle. So you have to really be careful and know what you're getting into with it.
I've always wondered, like a movie that you're doing, you got 8 different stories. So you've got a bunch of different actors in smaller parts. Do you think that makes it easier, and just generally from a movie making perspective, but also from making something that's SAG compliant and everything, is it easier having more people doing shorter stints, or do you think it would be easier to have 2, 3, 4 actors that are in the whole movie?
It depends because,
A lot fewer plane tickets you have to buy.
Yeah, and it's just a couple people that we've brought on that are SAG and flying out. A lot of them are local, and we have a lot of great local actors here that are going to be in the film. So when you have a smaller amount, it's like, say I know these 4 actors and they're awesome and amazing, and if I could use them through the whole film, then you're set. But when you have 30 plus speaking roles at the same time, then it can kind of turn into a problem because not even counting SAG, if they're just, coming in and we're saying, okay, I'm going to give you $100, it's 2 days, this or that. finding the right person for the right part and being able to kind of get all the schedules going. So it's pros and cons, because shooting these different stories means we can shoot it at different times, and that's what we're doing over a 2-month period. We're shooting 19 days with at these different sporadic times, and so it's like, okay, well, I've got you for these 3 days, so that's good, we're there. I don't have to have somebody for 20 straight days, and maybe they have a full-time job as well, that we can't do that. And so it does help in the fact of finding people, for these shorter stints. But at the same time, then you have more people to find, and you might have to kind of reach out further, and you want to find the right people for the right part.
Makes sense. So you finally got all this stuff figured out, and you got your budget. Can you say what the budget is?
Yeah, we were initially invested for $20,000 was what was approved, and then I put some of my own money, and then we're going with that full end investment and budget. It's just under $30,000.
How did you go about getting the financing? How do you pull this money together?
The financing, I mean, it's kind of like with film. It's everybody, it's who you know and the timing and such. And so I had these connections before, but I never had a project at that time. They knew of some of my past work, and it was kind of one of those, well, if you're ever doing something again, let us know type of things. And so when I finished the script, I approached them and said, hey, here's the story. And I walked them through kind of a synopsis and some of the main big scenes that I was thinking and the differences and all of that. And they were excited about it. And so they had me write up a business plan and sent it to them. And luckily, they were on board with it, and I was able to get, the investment from there. But
is this like a friends and family thing, or did you actually know producers who were?
Yeah, it's investors from there in California, and
okay.
so just looking to kind of diversify their portfolio, and we got lucky with them wanting to do this film, this media thing, and then luckily they were on board with the story and the ideas and the script and everything, and that helped. But short of that, I mean, it really would have been kind of out of pocket, before that happened. When I said, all right, I'm going to make this movie, it's like, all right, well, if I give everybody $100, even that adds up, because then you're like, oh, that's $3,500 just alone on the 35 speaking roles, and then you've got crew and all of that, so that adds up. But I knew that at least that's what I wanted to do, and we were going to make the movie regardless if that's how we did it. But having that budget has allowed us to go SAG. We're shooting in 4K. We have some extra money for finding a good location, here and there, and getting things that we need for the film, just to kind of make that production value that much higher. So
right. So speaking of locations and equipment, now that you've got your crew and your actors and your money, what's the next step? I guess you've got storyboarding, location scouting. How's all that gone? Yeah,
we've done a lot of location scouting. We're still finalizing some places now, trying to find and secure a couple places. But it's been an interesting process, because there were places that I thought would be easy to get that have not been easy, and there are things that I thought were going to be extremely hard that we got easier than anything. And so it's kind of been an interesting process with that.
Okay, what are some examples of that?
Well, like there's a scene where there's an undercover cop and a surveillance van and agent, and so we knew we needed a surveillance van. We knew that he was going to be arrested, and so we needed a real police car and real police uniforms and things like that. And so we've been actually working with the city of Roxborough, and Mayor Newell there has been amazingly helpful, and lighting fires under different departments and things of like, we want to do this. They were offering to shut down streets for us, and she got us hooked in with Captain Kirby of the Roxborough Police, and so we had a meeting with him, and essentially they're providing a police car, they're providing a uniformed officer, they're providing a uniform for our actor to wear, and then they're getting us like 2 different vans, a surveillance vehicle, things like that. So I thought those were going to be the really tough things to get, and we got them, fairly easily. And again, it goes back to kind of finding the right people and knowing the right timing of it all. But those are certainly things that that are out there, and Roxborough is huge, wanting to be in film friendly. And Apex, they're working with us, and we're shutting down a street, and some of the local businesses there are letting us shoot, and so some of those things have come along very easily, just because people are being so cool about it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And what was difficult? I'm going to guess the restaurant scene.
Yeah, the restaurant scene is the tough one
Always
because
hard to get a restaurant.
yeah, because not only is it hard to get a restaurant with this one, but it's a 12-minute scene, and so it needs to be during off hours, you know. And so we're looking at places that are closed on Sundays, and then you got to get somebody to come in on that Sunday who doesn't want to be there, you know, to allow you to go in and do it for this extended time. And then a couple of the places that we ran into that were really great, you know, when anybody says to you, "Oh, we've had people film here before," you're in trouble. It's just
Right,
like,
because that's not the next sentence is not positive.
yeah, because they either want money because, you know, like Bad Grandpa, you know, Johnny Knoxville, you know, the Jackass crew.
Right, they filmed around
They made
here.
that film. There's a bunch of places that they filmed, and we've run into 2 places now where they filmed that because, you know, that studio comes in and says, "Oh, we'll give you a couple thousand, you know, for this and that." That's the money they want from these indie films. And so, you know, we said, "Oh, we'd love to shoot here on a Sunday. We'll pay you. You know, well, it's not a lot, but it's enough to cover the salary of the person who will be coming in, and they can read a book, take a nap. You know, if they want to see the film, you know, they can see it. I'll put you in it. I don't care what we got to do. Just let us use this scene." And they're like, "Oh, well, they gave us $6,000, you know, so we can do it for $3,000." And it's like, I can give you $300 at most. And so, you know, we've run into problems there of trying to find this place. Plus, you know, when you have a 12-minute scene between 2 people in a restaurant, you need the right type of atmosphere too. You don't want just this flat wood wall. You know, you want something that has some character of its own, and something that when you're moving and you have some interesting lighting and you don't have shadows just right there on the wall. And so finding the right place, as well as one that is willing to help and can do it, and the right date and all of that, it's been a struggle. So we're still trying to finalize one of those now, but yeah, that's been one that's been tough to get.
Okay. Well, anything else? I mean, I think that covers most of the stuff leading up to it. When are you going to begin shooting?
We shoot a few days at the end of April, so in 2 weeks we're starting shooting, but then there's a break for a couple weeks into May, and then we regroup and start there. So yeah, so right now it's just kind of finalizing, you know, all of those things, getting everything in place, you know, finding people that, you know, are going to be here on this day or that day, and making sure that, yeah, all our ducks are in a row to be able to make it go smoothly.
Well, cool. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk to us. We'll get up with you again in a few months to see how production is going. So
Perfect.
good luck.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.